My name is Noah Kittner. I'm an assistant professor in environmental sciences and engineering at UNC-Chapel Hill, and I'm also affiliated faculty in city and regional planning and the environment, ecology, and energy program. What is decarbonization in an urban European context? Well, most people in Europe live in urban cities. I think around 75% of the population is in urban areas, and so decarbonization takes many forms. It's related to transportation, land use, energy generation, and Europeans in cities in particular are finding alternatives to private vehicles for transportation. So public transportation and walking and bicycling are main forms of transportation that are low carbon and contributing to the transition to use less fossil fuels. What kinds of other technologies are used to promote decarbonization? Rooftop solar, electricity, battery storage, and electric vehicles are some different technologies that are being used to reduce the carbon footprint of cities and places in Europe. There are also a lot of non-motorized transportation options, including designing cities that are more dense and walkable, which allows for people to get around without having to use a car. How are the US and Europe different in their approach to sustainability? Well, many of the cities in Europe are much older than cities in the US and have evolved over time around walkability and planned around community areas. The US has grown mostly through private vehicle ownership and has centered around the car. So the land use in Europe is very different, with many cities accessible via train and other public transportation means. So those are some major differences in the way people get around and also the way that cities are designed and the urban form of different places. Also, for a long time Europe has promoted alternative energy technologies like distributed solar and offshore wind energy that have created electricity for cities and urban areas across Europe. The other major aspect is related to heating. So in Europe, many cities have district heating district heating pipes which allow for more concentrated buildings and walkability, but also is more efficient in terms of spreading out heating compared to central heating in most US buildings. When did the shift towards sustainability take root? Well, the environmental movement has taken place over a long time in history in various shapes and forms. I think that modern sustainability in terms of the management of energy and resources dates back a lot in the U.S. in the 1970s to the oil embargo issues in 1973, but in Europe I think there have been a longer history of considering sustainability as we know it today. There have been concepts of environmentalism dating back through the Industrial Revolution. Some people might say the Brundtland Commission on Sustainable Development might have been one of the first global meetings to really start this movement. But I think now we're seeing transitions in sustainability and also a rise in the awareness of the public about sustainability issues. In the past decade, we've also seen more people considering the transition to a circular economy and concepts like circularity, where we could recover and reuse different materials in our supply chains and reduce the use of new material extraction. So, or raw material extraction. So this is also an emerging movement. What collaborations have we seen between the US and Europe, and have they been beneficial? So there have definitely been many beneficial agreements and collaborations between the US and Europe. In terms of technology transfer, trade, I would argue perhaps the most famous in the context of climate change and decarbonization is really the Paris Agreement, which fundamentally, I mean, the Conference of Parties occurred was hosted in France, in Paris in 2015, and that was one of the key global agreements where countries around the world came together to identify ways to reduce carbon emissions. And I think also, as a result of that, it created a framework for countries to hold each other accountable to different targets and create levels of ambition for decarbonization that didn't exist prior to the Paris Agreement. So that's really one way. It wasn't just the US and Europe, and actually many other countries around the world were also a part of this and critical to creating it. But then outside of different global governance actions, we've seen Europe and US partner on research and development for battery technologies, solar photovoltaics, which really were advancing through US, German, and Chinese innovation, have basically created very low-cost electricity, and with and European and US companies have collaborated on wind energy developments, and especially for offshore wind, which has accelerated the different options for using solar and wind on the grid. I think also because of a close scientific exchange and collaboration, there's been a lot of progress in terms of understanding or developing different tools to track and model the pollution from different sources in our environment that have been developed in Europe and the US, and understand what kinds of alternative energy technologies and other solutions might exist. I think there are several major opportunities for change and growth and decarbonization going forward. One of them is transitioning away from fossil fuels into renewable electricity, like using solar and wind as primary sources for electricity and our energy needs. Secondly, I think as we've created cleaner electricity, we've also begun to electrify other sectors of the economy, and that includes transportation. So part of electrification of transportation includes creating electric buses or public transportation options, developing denser, more walkable cities or other environments where you could bike or walk from place to place and use methods of non-motorized transportation. There's a very huge opportunity to design public spaces in ways that are walkable and bikeable. I think also from a decarbonization perspective, electrifying heating and cooling and creating more energy efficient buildings could go a long way in terms of reducing our energy demand overall, and also using more cleaner forms of energy to provide those services.